I'm very happy to see so many people here. For you, a very special study. This is the long-term toxicity of a Roundup herbicide, a major pesticide in the world, and the Roundup-tolerant genetically modified maize. The main point is that study has never been done by industry, food or regulatory agencies, nor requested by governments. Paper. We have the pleasure to have it published in one of the best journals in food toxicology, and this is even the same journal used by industries such as Monsanto to publish their opinion and their studies. Now, two main questions. Roundup-tolerant GMO. And why testing the safety of the most used herbicide in the world? Because pesticides and these GMO are spread everywhere. They are everywhere in the world, and so many people expect that several safety tests has been done and that this is not necessary to do that anymore. Understand the necessity of this test. Understand first that environmental GMO have been modified to produce their own insecticide or, in our case, to tolerate an herbicide. Thus, you must understand to contain high level of herbicide residue. In other words, 61% are herbicide tolerant. The plant has been modified to contain an enzyme making the plant insensitive to Roundup. 17% are producing their own insecticide. This is the case of BT maize and BT cotton. And 22% cumulated the characters and can absorb or produce pesticide, such as the Smart Stacks maize. So, you can see that the link is 100%. These are the real GMO, agricultural GMO, and the rest is almost philosophy. And nobody says that frequently in the debate. In this GMO, 80% are tolerant to Roundup. What is Roundup? This is the major pesticide in the world, a common pollutant, and this is a formulation of an active principle, the glyphosate, mixed in the formulation with various adjuvants, considered as inert diluent. This is important to keep in mind. We have studied this formulation by several articles and evidence first a differential toxicity on human cells between the formulation and glyphosate. Some formulations are 10,000 times more toxic than the lower doses in these human cells. We have evidence an endocrine disruption at the level of the sex hormonal balance. To come back to the differential effects, we have even showed recently that some of these adjuvants, which are considered as inert, can even be considered as active principle for non-target species. In the case of non-detoxilated adjuvants, you understand the necessity of testing the whole formulation instead of the active principle glyphosate, as it is usually done by industry for long-term toxicity. Now, for the GMO. After having reviewed the toxicity data of 1, then 3 GMO and evidence hepatorenal effects, we have studied the data published by the company of 19 agricultural GMO. And we have evidence the same effects signs above. This is not thus necessary to go forward and to repeat this test and to prolong this 90-day test. First signs of toxicity observed in 90-day test can reveal any pathologies on the long term. So, this is necessary to test the herbicide to understand if herbicide residue in the plant can cause possible pathological effects. So, we have designed this study, most detailed lifelong study on a mammal, investigating the possible effects arising from the Roundup-tolerant genetically modified or not during the culture, and investigating the possible effects of a complete commercial formulation of Roundup, and not only the active principle. What is important to notice in this protocol for Roundup herbicide is that we have started from very low levels, from 0.1 ppb, which is possible contaminating level of some regular tap water. And we have tested the Roundup up to 0.5%, which is half of the agricultural doses. Now, this is the protocol. The major point for this protocol is that this is the same protocol used for the assessment of the same maize, but improved with many measurements. So this protocol was just designed to repeat the experiment of Monsanto published in 2000, and this was performed according to OECD rule. So we have used 10 rats per group, as this is recognized in OECD. We have improved this protocol to go further with a longer test and many additional measurements. For example, we have tested 3 doses instead of 2, and we have go up to 24 months instead of 3 months. I can't give you any details. You can read the paper if you want. So I will go to the result, and we have shown really big effects. First, for the mortality, we have shown that the rats fed GMO and or Roundup died more rapidly and more importantly. For example, the first male fed GMO died 1 year before the first control. This is what you can see in this curve. You can see differential effects within the treatment. For example, the rats that can die more rapidly. This is often the case. You can see that here, for example, the beginning of the curve is often before the beginning of the control. The control are in dotted line. They are here. And the rats also died, sometimes more importantly. This is a different mortality. We prefer to show you the raw data instead of doing statistics, because no statistics is useful for a group of 10 rats. So we didn't claim any effects, any statistical effects on mortality. So what kind of pathologies were developed by the rats? I've seen mainly an increase in loss of tumors, and the rats died more rapidly and more more rapidly and more importantly. For example, we have 2 at 3 times more tumor in treated rats in both sexes. So now you can see the curve. These curves are very interesting. So you can first notice, for example, that for male rats, for the control, you can see only 1 little indentation here, meaning that there is almost no tumors in control male. Only 1 at the end. This was a skin fibroma. And you can observe the same differential here for the female. To some critics say that we have to take 50 rats for a carcinogenesis test. It's true for a carcinogenesis test. So this is not a carcinogenesis test. At first, we wanted of Monsanto the possible to see if the effects at the level of kidney and liver, the sign of effects evidence in the 90-day feeding trial, can be observed on the long term. We didn't have to expect any differential effects on tumor, but we were very surprised when we have prolonged the test after 3 months to see tumors beginning to arrive in all treated group, but not in control. So we have go up to 2 years. This had been criminal to stop the test when we begin to see an effect. Another thing to notice from this curve is that they are not linear. These are non-linear effects representative of chronic disorders. And this kind of hormonal disorders are often neglected by industry, which only consider linear effects, as all the chemicals can react like poison. However, the long-term effects are known to be mainly from chronic hormonal disturbance. For example, this is a classical hormonal effect. You can see that the maximum of the effect arrive at the lowest dose, and then you have a saturating effect. All people know this kind of effect. For the woman, when you have an increase in sexual hormones, you have the ovulation, and then a massive dose of sexual hormone, this is a contraceptive pill. Is a linear effect? No. The rats died mainly from hormonal disorders. The female, for example, died from mammary tumors. 93% of the tumors are in mammary gland. These are rats I had to print. All the effects in the mammary gland can be linked to the pituitary dysfunction. This is a classical pattern of effects in this strain of rats. For the male died mainly from pathologies in liver and kidney. In liver, we can notice congestion, macroscopic spot, and necrotic foci. The kidney, the rats died from chronic progressive nephropathy, which developed more earlier than in control and were more severe. I've summarized all these findings. I cannot go to the detail, but you can read the paper. And the main point from this table is that the pathological profile were similar in the three treatments. I recall you the treatment, the GMO alone, the GMO treated with Roundup, and Roundup alone. And the effects were sex-specific, non-linear, and hormone-dependent. So, how do we explain these effects? We were very surprised, first, for Roundup, when we see effects arising at very low levels, 0.1 ppb, which is the possible contaminating level of some regular tap water, and the effects with Roundup were important and saturating, and the rats developed 2.5 times more mammary tumors. So we have investigated the underlying of these effects. We have seen a disturbance in the sex hormonal balance. Here we show for female, but this is also for males. For example, for female, we can see an increase in testosterone level by 97%. This is what you can see here. The control is the black line, and the treatment with the lowest dose of Roundup is the red line. Each point is a rat. So you can see that all the treated rats with the lowest dose of Roundup have more testosterone than the control rats. The effect with Roundup were not surprising because we have evidence in previous studies that Roundup disrupts sex hormone balance. This was evidence in vitro, in vivo, and this was not surprising to see mammary tumors increase in our treatment because mammary tumors are known to be mostly estrogen dependent. For the previous studies investigating Roundup effects, we have shown that Roundup disrupts estrogen receptor, androgen receptor, and recently we have published an article evidencing that Roundup inhibits testosterone synthesis in rat testicular cells. And all this pattern of effects is confirmed in the experiment by pituitary dysfunction. Female treated with Roundup present 2.4 times more disabled pituitary than control. Now, knowing the mechanism of the effects at the lowest dose, we can easily understand effects of GMO treated with Roundup when Roundup residue are in the food. Intrarenal and mammary effects can be well explained by Roundup residue. We have shown, and other team has shown, that ultrastructural abnormalities evidence in liver of mice fed in our experiment can be repeated by in vitro studies, and Roundup effects were also shown in hepatocytes treated with Roundup in vitro. I have previously shown also Roundup cytotoxic for liver and kidney unit cells. This can be a basis to explain liver and kidney effects shown in male. Now, the most disturbing result was the effect of the GMO alone. we do not have to expect these effects, as the GMO have been assessed as so-called substantially equivalent. To understand these effects, we have to get back to the story of the GMO. The non-GMOs, when Roundup is sprayed on the maize, Roundup inhibits an enzyme, the PPSPS, an enzyme the plant has to synthesize aromatic amino acid, and these aromatic amino acid are the brick for the plant to synthesize protein. In maize, this enzyme is mutated, modified, and overexpressed. And known that the overexpression of this enzyme disturbs the whole metabolism of the plant. Evidence this disruption of the whole metabolism of the plant, we have taken phenolic acids such as ferulic acid and caffeic acid are as biomarker of this disruption. SPS is indeed involved in the synthesis of ferulic acid and caffeic acid. These are secondary metabolites of this pathway. And we have shown in the GMAs that ferulic acid is decreased by 16 to 30%, and caffeic acid is decreased by 21 to 53%. How does this depletion of phenolic acid explain the pattern? We have looked at the literature, and we have seen that ferulic acid and caffeic acid are well-known hepatoprotector and can prevent memory tumor. So this pattern of effect form a very coherent explanation for the effect of GMO, Roundup, and both. And we have also shown that plant extracts containing this acid are able to protect hepatic human cells from Roundup damage. We have to notice that all these pattern of effects do not exclude unexpected effects linked to transgene insertion. In conclusion, we have shown mammary tumors and hepatorenal toxicities developed with all treatment, that Roundup is harmful for health at very low level. I recall you, this is the level in contaminating tap water, and that toxic, unexpected metabolic effects are observed with the GMO alone. So we have to take some lesson from this study. First, authorization of this product need to be reconsidered. And so the 90-day test need to be extended for all GMO to 2 years. Third, pesticide need to be tested 2 years at very low level and in formulation, and not only the active principle, which is never used as such in the field. This is always the formulation which is sprayed. Also, the substantial equivalence does not support the lack of toxicity, and the regulatory test should be public, independent from companies. So we cannot be independent from all the world, but we can be independent from companies producing GMO. And this test have to be submitted to contradictory expertise. For your attention, we are open to discussion.
Yes, thank you very much. There's a second microphone. If you can just take it out of this suspender and pass it, that you put this close to your face. I'm going to make a short list of questions. Okay, we start with. Okay.
Press on. There is a button that says mute. If you know. Okay.
It works. This one works. Thank you. My name is Peter van der Meer. I'm here with the PRI, the Public Research and Regulation Initiative, organizing this, and I hope that you will make the power. I may have some observations for all three.
All three are open.
Good, because I assume you have built it up in a certain way. It's limited. It's chopped up risk assessment for 25 years and worked. And we look at purified products. You look at how. You look at purified products. It is much more than that. You look at. You can't hear me. Can you hear me like this?
Yes. You have to really put it.
So it's indeed, it does start with purified products. When you look at the plant, how it behaves in the greenhouse, the labs, there's a whole range of things that are being looked at. It goes quite far. Now, one concern you have is that what is not taken into account is how the product is being used afterwards. For example, if you have herbicide following crops, this can result or lead to farmers using herbicides. Yeah? And if you have overuse of herbicides, that's one of the aspects. Here I would say that if you would do that, then you would go over the risk assessment itself. This is not inherent to the crop, it is. You can use every tool you have wisely and unwisely. In the same way you could say, if organic farming is done unwisely, and we've seen terrible stories of that. The risk assessment goes up to the inherent characteristics of that particular crop. How the pesticides are used, or the herbicides in this case, is indeed something that is assessed and very thoroughly assessed under different regulatory systems. I would say that as such, there is nothing wrong with it. It's true that the product can be used in various ways, wisely and unwisely. Now, this links nicely to the presentation, and I like the presentation of John Vandenberg. Indeed, if you start using a pesticide over very long periods, over very large areas, it's almost inevitable that you get some resistance. This is the same here. I like your data. And there's a good reason to try to avoid that. If you have something as BM crops, BT crops, you would like to avoid resistance. Why? Because it helps you reduce the use of pesticides. If you look at this, the data you presented, and indeed you have found apparently a lot of resistance. One of the first questions, of course, is the fear of getting resistance, would that be enough to say no? Because what is your problem if there is resistance? It would be a problem, for example, if you use microbial pesticides. It cannot be used anymore. But if you have the resistance development in your case, which is still something you wouldn't want, because you want the benefits, but if you have resistance development in your case, and let's say all insects would be resistant in South Africa, then you're not worse off, you're back to square one. So you've had a period where you had reduced pesticide use because of the BT, because of the massive, let's say that you have hypothetical, a high degree of resistance development, you're back to that part. There is no additional risk, you're not worse off as you were. But I fully agree with you, you would try to do everything to keep those benefits and try to postpone resistance development. And indeed, I like your list, stacked genes, seed mixing and so forth. But we need to go on the extra step, is that if this is part of decision making, would the assumption that there might be resistance development, would that in itself be enough reason to say, no, we don't want this? And then to the last point, I took some notes, the research, and the article recently published by Seralini and his group, I didn't get the gentleman's name. He started off by saying this is never done before, and I agree with that. I don't think any toxicology institute would do it in this way, so that's true. I think the article itself is a poor article. What's worse is that the underlying research has fundamental flaws. The research, the way you've done this, your choice of rats and the things you've done, those data would not allow for any conclusions statistically. What you've done is you've handpicked certain cases and publish those. Now, there's no time here, I guess, to go into detail what's wrong, because I have a long list here, what's wrong with the research. The recent opinion of the Federal Institute, the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, exactly the same conclusion, that the research you've done doesn't allow for any conclusions whatsoever. You've taken something very low numbers. Have you taken rats that will develop cancer in any case? You've tested a low number of those, and then you handpicked some results, and so forth. I think that's inappropriate as a scientist.
Thank you very much. I take the second, so you want to have an immediate response?
This was a lot already to respond
Yeah, I think
to,
so,
you
yeah.
know, but
Yeah. Then I start with Angelika.
Well, you put it nicely, Pete. That's exactly what we disagree on. That's exactly what I tried to lay out in my presentation. Your thinking is of a narrow risk assessment where you reduce it to the particular trait in the plan, and you don't accept that you look beyond this. While for the benefits, of course, there's wide claims. And I say, well, that is not acceptable for a risk assessment. Nobody says it's not a divine, not God tells us how we do risk assessment. We have a different view of how to do risk assessment, and we look at it in broader perspectives. It's not only the trait, it has to look at interactions, it has to look at how it performs in the field. And if the claim is that you are going to reduce socioeconomic, you're going to reduce pesticide, if that is part of the benefit, we need to be able to validate whether that is true. And if it is not true, then it is part of the overall assessment the regulator has to make. A regulator has to put the benefits on one side, has to put the risks on the other side, and he has to use the same measurement of both sides. You can't just look in centimeters on one side and in kilometers on the other side. So it's got to be the same level of rigorosity, the same level of claims, and at the same level of parameters and claims that are being made. And this is where we will forever disagree, I'm afraid. But it's not up to you or me to make a decision on that. It is up to all of us in the room and the debate and the discourse to where is a society, where do we want to go, how do we want to look at introduction of technologies, what parameters are going to go into the assessment, what not. That's really what the debate is about. And, well, here's mine and there's yours, and we have to come to some understanding in a public, fair discourse, which has something to do with our vision, where we want to go as a society, where we want to go with our agriculture and our food production, and how do we want to look at adverse and health effects. Because those effects that Johnny has been presenting, for example, were perfectly predicted. And they are predictable now too. And the weed resistance were all perfectly predicted. It's just they were not included in the risk assessment, hence we didn't look at it, hence we didn't have any weed resistance management plans in place. We had insect resistance management in place because it was dedicated scientists who in the early 90s put it in the EPA on their radar so that they actually had to look into it and did assessments. But for weeds, this didn't happen. And so here we are. And you cannot, I find it a bit unfair when you put the blame on the farmer that he's using too much herbicide. Well, that's inherent in the technology. No farmer buys more expensive herbicide-resistant crops and then not spraying glyphosate. That's just not, that's irrational. It would be irrational for a farmer to do. So a farmer who buys herbicide-resistant maize, and it's not only maize, it's the same one with canola, it's the same one with cotton, it's the same one with soybean, and at least soybean, cotton, and maize is growing in similar agroecosystems, so you're having a repeated application year after year in a lot of these bulk crops that have to use glyphosate, or they would be wasting their money. It would be irrational not to use it. And this is inherent in the technology, and we're saying if you go through an assessment, this has to be considered. Because we can't just leave it up to the farmer and say, well, heck, just don't spray glyphosate. And then what? He sprays 2,4-D, atrazine, all these lovely herbicides that we all claimed at the beginning we're going to get away from. It's not happening. And, well, I turn it over.
Yes, I see two major critics, which are the shows of the rats and the statistics. First, for the rats. I invite you to go on PubMed, which is the largest database for scientific publication, and you fill with Sprague-Dawley carcinogenesis or Sprague-Dawley toxicity studies, and you will see that this strain of rats is usually used for this kind of toxicity studies. Second, for the statistical analysis, I repeat, this is not a carcinogenesis study, so we don't have the tools to analyze the statistical significance of tumorigenic effects. However, if you read the paper, you will see that we have used a new method, OPLSDA, to analyze biochemical effects. And this analysis pointed out that kidney and liver are also reached by all the treatment, as it was previously shown in the Monsanto test. So this form coherent explanation, and I'm not agree with your conclusion, because there is a body of evidence evidencing that Roundup mainly targets kidney and liver and is a sex endocrine disruptor. This was previously shown in vivo and in vitro. And I don't see other critics, but yeah, it is.
Yes, probably those rats are being used. I'm just looking at 2 studies by the dog from Monsanto.
Johnny, you would like to bring a short...
I'll be very short. You asked, would resistance evolution be a reason for saying no to the technology? My answer is no. We're going to get the technology, and we have the technology. My message that I would bring is that that we need to manage this. And I see a lot of irresponsible management from various sides of the case, from various sides. Stewardship goes for a joke in many places. And you said that we're going back to square one, and I agree with you. We are going back to square one. It started 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But the fact that the stack is going to be lost within 3 or 4 years, and there's nothing in the pipeline, is then the bubble is going to burst with our farmers, and we gave them hype, and we should have given them hope a long time ago. And that's what I'm afraid of.
Thank you very much. This is really good. You have a short reply on that?
Yes, please. Can I have the microphone?
But it's not going to be a dialogue between Peter and us now.
We have more.
I'll be brief. First of all, because Angelica said we want a broad look or narrow. It's not a matter of narrow or broad. The impacts you would look at, I say, is being looked at in different form. The whole idea of overuse of herbicides is not something that is being different. There are experts with different fields they're looking at.
Yeah, but in the risk assessment for GMOs, not somewhere else.
And exactly, and it's appropriate not to have it in there because the experts that look at herbicide are herbicide experts. One thing you said, because it is inherent in the product that they overuse, but it's nonsensical. There's nothing inherent in the product that you abuse herbicide.
I'm not talking about abusing, about using it. That's inherent in it.
But it's not necessarily, it's not the user is inherent in it. You should be very careful on how you phrase this. Coming back to the rats, because I have to be brief. These rats
you're obliged by an agreement with Monsanto to use the herbicides.
No, but Monsanto or any company don't force you to overuse or to keep on using.
Overuse.
It's used. You're not forced to do that. This is nonsense.
You're forced to buy it, in fact.
Coming back to, no, you can happily buy the seed without the herbicide. Nobody will force you to buy the herbicide. Now let's go back to those rats. We should all understand it. This hype article is all based on alleged impacts on rats. These are rats that are particularly developed for certain kind of toxicity and carcinogenicity research. What these rats have is that after a while, after 100 days, they start increasingly they get cancer. After 2 years, over 70% of them develop cancer. It's a very specific strain. So this means that if you look at these things after those 2 years in such low numbers, you cannot conclude anything. And I repeat, and I have this document that's downstairs on the table. This is the first of a series of articles that will come on this case by the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment. That the way you've done this, you cannot make any conclusions. And these rats are used in 90-day studies. Why? Because in that first period, there is still no natural development of these rats for cancer. That's why they're used. They're never used for 2-year studies. If you use them for 2-year studies, then you would have to increase your number of rats you're checking above 30 and towards 50. So you have to present this, and I think you should have presented this in your article, that this is very specific about these rats, and that they're being used in very different circumstances for very different purposes.
Next on our list is gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much for all the presentation. Everyone who care about the GMO products can or not affect the human health. Just have a very interesting about the experience feed the rats for 2 years can tumor, and this news I think just erotic. And I have 2 questions. One is the experiment is standard experiment or not other? Did you repeat this theme, the experiment, or let the person do this experiment? If you have the same condition for 600 days and get the result is the same, at that time we can give the true doubt about this.
Yes, I have a little problem with foreign
Even if I can understand very well, even if I can understand very well, you give the.
I understand the first part of the question with the standard.
Yes, 2 questions. Yeah.
So, for your first question, we applied standard for the 90-day experiment we want to repeat. This is according to OECD 408. And when we began to see tumors, we wanted to go further, but there is no protocol adapted, because if we want to make conclusion on carcinogenesis and tumorigenic effect, we have to take 50 rats. We're okay, but we cannot stop the experiment when we begin to see effects. If it's not enough for people to conclude, the experiment have to be repeated. And for your second part, I don't.
The repeat is very important.
Yes.
I think it's difficult. The 600 days, day by day, you should have the same condition.
But those are facilities who do these trials at
I'm not a biologist, I'm a public policy person. Points that have been raised already. I've always said with some of the studies by independent scientists that indicate that there might be problems, that if we lived in a truly rational and sane society, governments or corporations would put some money into larger studies to see if they're replicable or if they're not replicable. And the problem is that governments, there not be a large sum of money by any comparative. For corporations, I could understand why some of the corporations might not want to do the studies, although it would be nice if they did it and had it open and transparent. But certainly governments who spend so much money sending people to meetings like this and everything, ought to put some money into replicating these studies with enough, in this case I presume 50 rats seems to be the number. And I will say, as a non-biologist, but as a policy person, I can't understand why. And I hope, Dr. Vandermeer, that you advocate between some of the governments that you have connections with to do exactly that. Secondly, the divorcing of technology as if it's some kind of force, like some kind of alien force separate from human purposes and intentions, is no longer credible among people who are serious observers, acts of God or acts of nature. They're acts of human beings. Particular technologies are developed to do particular things that the people with the money to develop them and so forth want done. In 2002, I was in Johannesburg for the UN Summit on Sustainable Development. And I was debating on television, South African television, a woman named Emmy Simons, who was the deputy director of the US AID, the Agency for International Development. And of course, USAID has been a promoter of GE, as knows. And the debate was very lively and very heated. So lively and heated, in fact, that when the half hour ended and the moderator thanked us, we were still going at it. And off camera, she said to me, and I've written this article is available on the internet and so forth. She said to me, what you do not understand is that pretty soon we will have introduced enough GMOs into South Africa so that the whole continent will be contaminated. In other words, these human things are not separate from the technology. This technology was being pushed by a very major power because this result would happen. Okay? And somehow to say that we can do an assessment, which is a public policy document, by the way, and to serve public policy purposes, by the way, and ignore the realities of social and political and economic forces, and somehow deal with technologies as if the gods just magically made them appear, is naive. We're past that stage. We're past that stage. Rachel Carson and others, and Ralph Nader, and Barry Commoner, and a whole host of other people have brought us past that stage of blindness. And we can't go back, and we won't go back.
Thanks. I take that as a comment.
Yes, these are all comments.
Yes.
They have all been comments. They're disguised as questions sometimes, but they're comments.
I have two more on my list. Jack and the lady here. And I think I like to close this. Maybe we have more time than the next two on the list.
Yes, this is Osama Mumtaz from Egypt, member of the BRRI. I didn't fully follow the first two presentations, but the third presentation I was keen to attend. I had been reading like a week ago, had really a profound effect about what's happening in Egypt. I just wanted, very important to say, if we're dealing with science, we have to understand that we have to do proper science. There is pseudoscience and there is biased science. Yes. There are a lot of scientific communities that actually manipulate science because they don't put enough data, they don't do proper experiments. So in countries that have a literate level of information, get this, they think that science is contaminating their life, killing their life. Nobody want to kill. There is no conspiracy theory here. I got this paper beside 19 papers with the same author. I don't know who is the author, maybe the group CD, it's your group, and I just saw some science here. And then I got a reply from more than 24 professors all over the world. And the institutions and the governments and every professor got these papers still apart. That this is no science. These are just a group of people who want to be famous in the middle. We have to consider that we're dealing with a larger population in this earth. Not all of them molecular biologists from Stanford. So there is a responsibility. It's not being fair to come out with science that's not complete. And it's not a joke that you are actually stating information and not considering the critique seriously. You are manipulating people's lives by false information.
So, can you please?
That's a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just would like to remind you that this was a peer-reviewed article. So
the others also might be peer-reviewed. You have 24 reply peer-reviewed.
And you might then write your criticism to the editor.
Yes, there is already
I know.
The 24 guys wrote the criticism and they want to close that journal. And there is a court case. And
but why are you so hateful?
It's just I'm upset that you are manipulating a lot of population. They are not in the level of information. If we need to talk about toxicology and toxicology experiments and the basis, how many professors in toxicology in this room?
I haven't heard any science yet. Reply on the science?
There's no need to reply on the science. I can see science to reply on.
Well, good. Okay,
What
then I think we should move forward now.
Propaganda and people talking to someone to be famous. Where is the science?
I think, please.
This is a
I'm
science.
talking about science-based information. About proper information. That's it.
We are not going to engage now in this kind of talks. We heard your arguments. We continue that. Jack is on the list. The next.
I think we're talking about censorship. We're not talking about science. What we have are corporations who have unlimited budgets to advertise to us and manipulate people in all countries all the time. And I haven't seen this group coming out as a pack to discuss papers put out by the industry, one after the other, which have flaws. There is no significant difference in the number of rats or in the nature of the trial between industry studies before they're peer reviewed being used by regulators to assure us of the safety of these products. Sorry, my name is Jack Hyman, Center for Integrated Research and Biosafety. So what we're talking about here is a group of scientists who have decided that they should be gatekeepers to information. Information that is passed through peer review, anonymous blind peer review, the same standards that we have set for decades on the nature of the quality of science. You are saying to us that you know better. Yet the positions we take are based on our ability to put forward our information to a community of our peers, and this was done. Nobody is denying that this information needs to be replicated. Experiments need to be replicated. But all I have heard is that the study did not meet the standards of evidence that you require to be convinced that there are indications of potential adverse effects. That is not true of the entire scientific community. Certainly it's not, because it went through anonymous peer review. And I also believe that it meets substantially my standards to indicate plausible adverse effects. Other thing I've heard, which shocks me, that really what we have is the absence of industry doing studies, or at least reporting results of studies, in which they have chosen other rats and already put to rest questions of long-term effects. It's not like somebody yesterday dreamed up the need for long-term effect studies. This has been in the literature, and it's been in front of the regulatory community for decades. So if you are concerned that other people are doing these studies and starting to get evidence of potential adverse effects, then why wasn't it proactively settled by the industry through studies that do meet your standards of evidence of safety and published in a peer-reviewed journal? And in particular, why wasn't that done before regulators made decisions on studies that largely nobody has access to because of confidential, so they can't be replicated outside a very select community? Instead, the efforts there, rather than hounding your fellow scientists who are doing science, meeting your standards for publication authority, and not also asking for your studies to be taken from the literature.
What's the question? The lady is the next one. No, please, she's on my list.
Bhatnagar. I'm a scientist with ICRISAT, which is the International Crop Research Institute for Urban GMOs. And I have a comment to make with this last presentation, where the authors have very conveniently come up with a conclusion of toxic metabolic effects observed with the GMOs in this particular study, and also recommended that 90 days test needs to be extended for 2 years, especially knowing that this particular strain of mice, it forms...
It's not mice. What are you talking about? Yeah, it was yesterday in the pamphlet that was later was also mice. It's not mice. It's
the same strain of rats. What I got to know, but when I searched the literature, that when the life is extended in these rats, they have an inherent tendency to form tumors, and especially with small number of use the 10, which is, and you didn't show any statistical differences with all your 3 treatments. I think it is very much biased to give this kind of recommendation for such an important study. That's fine.
We have already replied to this question with the statistics. We cannot do statistics on carcinogenic effects because this is not a carcinogenesis studies, and we have reported the raw data. And I agree with the rats develop easily tumors, but you can see huge differential effects, and this has to be considered to extend this research and to repeat or to reconsider the authorization of the product.
So the time comes to an end, but I see that people seems to like to continue. So the next 2 analysts is the lady and the gentleman over there. And then we have some more.
That has worked for years with farmers, and I'm so very much disappointed, and I was concerned of the comments that when something goes wrong in your science, you blame us, you blame the farmers, you blame us for not doing refugio, you blame us for putting in too much pesticides in our fields, when in the first place you know that this will happen, but nothing has been done about it. I also appreciate the question of China of the study, because if this has not been done for the past 25 years, can risk assessors just like you, sir, do it also, and can you have the same results? Because that for us farmers will count. it will help us, whether or not we will continue planting GMOs, even if we are forced into it because of incentive posed by a lot of governments in introducing GMOs into our field.
Thank you. South Africa.
My name is Ben, regulator from South Africa, and I strongly disagree with the implication that South Africa.
Can you hold it
Closer. Yeah, we don't hear.
I share the disappointment that this is normal for good, and I think there are always two sides to every story. It's alarming when you only hear one. So the only question I have, and sorry I missed your talk, Angelica, the question I have is to Johnny, and I think I know your answer, but given that pesticides have been used in traditional agriculture forever, and there's also the same kind of predictability to say that insects will develop resistance for traditional, if it's called traditional insecticides. Whose responsibility is it to manage insecticides used then for GM?
Yeah, when you say traditional agriculture, I mean you mean the
non-GM.
The non-GM large-scale
industrial
agriculture, because the smallholder farmers do not use insecticides. Okay, so if I heard you correctly, you're asking, well, we of course we know that resistance will develop. With insecticides, it's very easy to change the modality of action to rotate insecticides within a season. It's very easy. The IRM with insecticides is easy, the selection pressure is not so serious. So resistance development is very, in stem waters, has never happened in the world. And there will continuously be new insecticides, and there are many different ones. My problem here is, and the message I want to give out is that the last BT event for stem waters is the one we are using now. So that's the message I want to bring across. So the responsibility for managing, and I think the chemical companies the insecticide companies took that up pretty serious. But we should discuss the rubber stamp comment later.
Yes, thank you very much. There were two.
The hysteria and indeed the schizophrenia of the industry, because they apply to the independent scientists tests that they just wouldn't do. I would like to give you an example from India where we tried to get data from the industry. It was stonewalled month after month. We finally went to the Supreme Court, got an order. It was stonewalled for another 16 months under contempt of court before they complied. I might add here that the regulator supported the industry in stonewalling the raw data of Monsanto's gossip. Of course, when the raw data was finally put into the public domain, then the cockroaches came out of the woodworks because that dossier would not pass peer review. And I'm saying to the industry that as long as there is a single doubt as to what is in these dossiers, we don't want the products.
I must say that I'm in a way pleased that the debate is heating up, because we urgently need these talks. And if I read historical reports about what happens in the salons of Paris when thermodynamics was introduced, that was exactly that type of debate, and we need it. And of course people are passionate, otherwise they would not pursue their intellectual interests so much. So I don't mind the passion and I don't mind the contradiction. On the other hand, I'm absolutely delighted about the voice of reason from China saying, let's do these experiments with 50 rats, with 100 rats. Let's test also for different hypotheses of the causation of the effects, and let's do it in many countries, because that is exactly how these debates are sorted out in science. So if this experiment in France triggers off all these experiments with 50 rats, and then you can put into question the type of rat, although of course it looks as if the zero control had lower effects, but we have to test for that. Don't test on any rat that has no development of tumor whatsoever, because that is not only a double zero but a quadruple zero experiment, because then it doesn't develop it. So there are a lot of technical questions, experiment, that we have to sort out, but let's hope, and this is why the biosafety protocol is a good place, let's hope that it speeds up this debate, it speeds up making the experiments. I hope for China to repeat it, to enter into the discourse on these issues, and to really sort it out earlier than we would without these discourses. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
I have three more. Three more, and then I close the session. First, the gentleman in the back, and
like Christina, I don't mind the debate. I think this is good. But just to put the record straight and follow up on a few points. One of the, I think you said it here, why does the industry, we are not here with the industry, we're the public research sector. Why are public researchers so upset about this? Because this is unprecedented, the furor about this article that came out. You see petitions, you see people in the newspaper and so forth. Why is that? Because it's the impact on public researchers. This is presented as self-proclaimed independent researchers. I think we should get rid of that notion. Nobody is ignorant enough in this field to have no opinion of this. Independence means that the result of your work can be independently verified and repeated. That's independence. It's not what you think motives of someone else or whether they paid by Carrefour or whatever. So that's the one thing. Following up on 90 days is not enough. We should go to 2 years, and that's one of the things that's missing here. Because if you think, apart from the wrong choice of the rats and the numbers, you should place these results, if there were such results, in the context. We have longer tests. Yeah? These crops have been doomed by billions of portions. Much longer tests. So these things are not placed in context. Then the idea is to repeat the test. To repeat this test would be nonsensical, because it had all the flaws it has, and again, you'll find many articles on that. In fact, it was said it would be unfair to stop the test when you start seeing effect. I think it's immoral that these rats grow, continue these tumors. Well, you know they will develop tumors. There are countries where this is actually not allowed to develop. So I think we should go back to a more reasonable debate. And if you do a test like this and you want to repeat it, then you make a different choice of rats, you make a different choice of numbers and so forth. But then I would go back and say that this kind of work has been done so many times. And because you could repeat whatever you want, and the debate starts again after 4 or 5 years, and then people say, oh, let's repeat everything again. You are based on the table, you actually trigger a budget that starts repeating everything. And I would say that the results of this article do not do that. If anything, if something that is unexpected, and you see significant effects, strong as its follow-up.
One. You want to have a 10 seconds.
Some of the questions, I come from India. I convene a large coalition of farmers, organizations, scientists, public, consumer activists, filmmakers. It's called the Coalition for a GM-Free India. We are very worried, and that's why I'm here. I carry on with what Aruna Rodriguez just mentioned. After the case, and after the document dossier came out, after a struggle that she and a lot of others took for more than 2 years to get just the documents out, Monsanto's documents out. Then that was when given off to independent review of scientists across the country, not across the world, not one scientist, but more. And they all came back and said that the interpretation of the results, which the companies did to show or to demonstrate that their products are safe, was wrong. And they came into the reinterpretation and said how it impacts on kidney, liver, all problems are found. And let me tell you, if at all there is a moratorium on BT brinjal in India, it's not because the public had a big struggle against BT brinjal. It's not because of that. And I know industrial lobby is going and telling that it's the anti-GM lobby which did it. It is not because of that, but it's because the industry did a very shabby report, put it out into the government, and when it got exposed, they got banned. The government banned it. It was a government decision to stop BT Brinjal, not a public decision to stop it. So I'm saying that some things are better now than being very late about these things. And after that, let me tell you, as a community, as people of this country, and we have been traveling across the country to look at this issue, we have lost complete faith in the data that industries produce. And I want to make it a statement very clear. We have lost completely, and not we alone. We walk into governments, and even governments have lost faith. Even in the Indian scientists who are working on GM, we have lost faith. Now, if you have to bring back faith into our system, you have to do a lot of work, which includes things like completely relooking at the protocols. Because Dr. Pushpa Bhargava, who has been guiding, who is known as the father of genetic engineering in India, he himself has put up 29 studies which need to be done. He's part of the regulatory body. He's not outside, he's the part of the regulatory body. And when he comes up and makes statements like this, I have seen scientists doing GM crops get up and say that, sir, the number of protocols that you have put up is too much. Can you reduce a few for us? Is it a bargaining exercise that you're trying to do? Let's not be driven away by these considerations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So
we call it off now.
I think I close the statements 3 o'clock. The session has started. Thank you very much for everybody. There will be a follow-up.